I am standing outside the Southern District of New York, where Ghislaine Maxwell was just found guilty on 5 out of 6 charges. So I want to break down for you how we should expect sentencing to come down. Now, with respect to who is going to be issuing sentencing, that's a good question. So I will tell you that Judge Allison Nathan, during the course of this trial, appeared before Congress for the purposes of being confirmed to become a Second Circuit judge. Now, assuming she is confirmed before the sentencing date is scheduled to occur, which I do not have that information as to when that date is set to happen. Assuming she is confirmed, at that point the decision would be unilaterally Judge Nathan's as to whether or not she wants to be involved in the sentencing or punted to a third-party judge who would issue sentencing based on the court guidelines and the findings of the jury. I would expect, this part is my personal opinion, I would expect that Judge Nathan, seeing as how this case is probably considered the pinnacle of her career, this is arguably the biggest case that any judge would likely get, I would be surprised if she punts on the opportunity to issue sentencing on her own. So I do anticipate that she will be the one who will be deciding the duration of Maxwell's sentence. So let's break down how those sentences should look. So Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on charge number 1, and charge number 1 is conspiracy to commit charge number 2, the substantive charge of 18 U.S.C. 2422, which is inducing a minor to cross state lines for purposes of engaging in illegal sexual conduct. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell was found not guilty. She was acquitted with respect to charge number 2, the substantive charge of inducing a minor to cross state lines. She was, however, found guilty of conspiracy to commit that crime. Conspiracy to commit that crime is a sentence of up to 5 years. It's a shorter sentence than she would have been facing had she been found guilty of the substantive crime of inducing a minor. What's very interesting about this finding is that much of the testimony of this case related to Ghislaine's role in grooming these minors for the purposes of engaging in Jeffrey Epstein's illicit sexual activities. The judge instructed the jury that with respect to charge 2, they can only convict if they believe the testimony of Jane as to what occurred between the years 1994 and 1997 while Jane was still a minor. She reached the age of majority beyond that period. And that was how the judge limited the jury and said you cannot convict for any of the other victims who testified, and you can only be for that limited period of time any conduct that Ghislaine Maxwell took during that period of time. And the judge said, and the jury came back and said not guilty, not on the substantive, but guilty on the conspiracy charge. So again, that is a charge of up to 5 years, and the judge has full discretion up to 5 years as to the duration of the sentence will be. The jury came back and with respect to charges 3 and 4. This relates to 18 U.S.C. 2423. This is not inducement to cross state lines for the purposes of sexual activity, but it's actually transporting a minor across state lines for the purposes of engaging in illegal sexual activity. Again, with respect to charge 4, the jury was instructed that they can only convict if they find guilt with respect to Jane's testimony during that same period of 1994 to 1997. On that one, the jury convicted, which is a very interesting thing. Why would they convict on charge number 4 and not convict on charge number 2? Well, one theory is that there was testimony from Jane that when she was on her return trip from New Mexico, she tried getting along a commercial airliner and was not allowed on by herself because she was too young. And she called Ghislaine Maxwell, and the situation was resolved, and she was able to get on the commercial airline. And apparently, one would think that the jury found that as a basis to believe that she was involved in the transport. The reason that's a little curious is because one would read that statute and typically think that it's associated with transporting to a destination that she's going to be engaging in illegal sexual activity, as opposed to away from that jurisdiction. In that the flight that she testified about specifically that Ghislaine Maxwell helped her out on was to come back home from New Mexico to Florida. One would think that the jury may have said to themselves, hey, Ghislaine was helping her escape from this illegal activity that was happening in New Mexico. So if that is the case, you would ask yourself, well, why is it that they found guilt on number 4? It's a little tough to tell. Maybe they read that situation as implying that Ghislaine Maxwell was responsible for getting her out to New Mexico as well. Or maybe they felt that that was reflective of her role in transporting her from Florida to New York. where those were other situations that Jane, as a 16-year-old, was being transported for purposes of illegal sexual conduct. At any rate, what we do know is this: the jury has convicted on charges number 3 and number 4. Number 4, again, is that substantive charge of 18 U.S.C. 2423, transporting a minor, and charge number 3 is conspiracy to engage in that same crime. Now, I'm not a criminal defense attorney, as I've told you many times here. However, I have spoken with many members of law too who are criminal defense attorneys, and they've testified that when you have guilt on both a substantive charge and a conspiracy charge, typically the court will roll that conspiracy charge into the sentencing of the conspiracy charge. They will roll that conspiracy guilt into the substantive guilt. Now, what is the sentence period for a violation, for conviction on 18 U.S.C. 2423? Well, the statute says that it's a minimum of 10 years and up to life. So one may think that perhaps her guilt on the conspiracy may raise that toll from 10 years up to 15 years, or somewhere beyond that. It could be for life. Or, in theory, it may be ignored altogether. But what we know from this is that there's a guilt of a minimum of 10 years for that charge alone. And it could be up to life. So that's part A here. So we have, then let's come to, it's technically part B, because charge 1 and 2 was part A. This is part B. Let's get to part C here, which is charge number 5 and 6. Now, charge number 6 related to Carolyn. And the judge limited the jury, saying that you can only convict on charge 6 if, in fact, you find that Ghislaine Maxwell was culpable for the activity between, with respect to Carolyn, between the years 2001 and 2007. Now, Carolyn testified that she was somewhere 13, 14, 15, 16. What age she was, a little bit confusing as to when these crimes occurred. And the jury accepted her testimony and convicted Ghislaine Maxwell for her involvement with Carolyn. Now, the charge there relates to 18 U.S.C. 1591. This is when you're using you're engaging in commercial activity that has crossed state lines for the purposes of inducing a minor to engage in illegal sexual activity. So what they were talking about is whether or not the massage table that was used in context with Carolyn's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, seeing as how that crossed state lines from California to Florida, that now could create a culpability for her involvement as a member who's involved in this entire scheme, and therefore they must have found that there was sufficient basis either for that massage table or for FedEx packages that came from New York to Florida that was sent. The testimony came that Jeffrey Epstein had sent those packages, not Ghislaine Maxwell, but apparently Ghislaine Maxwell was attached in liability here for those packages, which would explain why we have venue here in New York. So it's more likely the FedEx package. At any rate, the jury did find guilt there, and under the statutes, if Carolyn is judged to be 14 or under, the minimum period is 15 years to life. If she's 15 or she's between 15 and 17, in that case, the minimum period for conviction would be 10 years to life. Again, that's charge 6, and then we have charge 5 where there was guilt, where there was conspiracy. And each of these conspiracy charges would, in theory, tack on another 5 years. Whether or not the judge adds and tolls on an additional 5 years for that, that's something that's unknown. This is all up to Judge Nathan's individual discretion as to how she wants to apportion sentencing. So, just to total up everything we have here, okay? So the biggest charges that she was convicted on are charges 4 and 6. Each of those have a separate charge of 10 years to life. In addition, she was found guilty on all 3 conspiracy charges. You have the conspiracy charge number 1 for 18 U.S.C. 2422, and you have the conspiracy charges for those other substantive charges that she was found guilty of. One would think that we're looking at a period here of conviction, of sentencing, of somewhere in excess of 20 years, and arguably for the rest of Ghislaine Maxwell's life. I will just take note of this. When I came out of this thing, and I made my predictions. You may recall, I said, I do not expect that we're going to see convictions on all charges here, but I do think we'll see sufficient convictions that she's going to get a sentence in excess of a couple of decades. And I think this really vindicated me. I'm feeling really good about my prediction here. Anyway, the press is out here waiting to see a statement from someone. We don't know if there's going to be a defense counsel that comes out here. We don't know if it's going to be a representative from the United States. We don't know who's coming out here, but they're all expecting that someone's going to come out here. There has been mic stands that have been set up here for someone to make a statement. I do not expect to be covering that live for you. I will flesh this out. I'm urging you, you must like, you must subscribe, share this out. People need to know what's going to happen with this. Everyone wants to know about the sentencing. I'll bet you right now, you can't find anyone else, as of right now, when this thing is uploaded, that has spelled out for you the sentencing on this. I'm going to flesh this out in greater detail tonight for you and give my whole wrap up of this trial on my live stream tonight at 10 p.m. So please, make sure you share this, tweet it out, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is. Get a flash drive, make copies of it, and just like leave it in different like post offices, leave it in the train station, leave it everywhere so everyone can get this information. This is a vital story the whole world needs to know about. I've done my part. Now it's up to you to do yours. Oh, and hit the bell. Thanks so much. I'm out. My live stream, 10 p.m., fleshing everything out, 10 p.m. Eastern. Till then, Godspeed.